Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Even if you are helping yourself to appetizers, feel free to continue. We will still have a couple people that will be showing up late, so I think we're okay with them showing up. I think there's enough seats. Again, my name is Julie Shoemaker. I'm the curator of exhibits here at the Boulder History Museum. In the back, we have Nancy Geyer, our CEO. And together with many of the people who have presented throughout this series, helped us put together the Tita Tofu exhibit. Real quick, we would like to thank tonight both Wild Oats and Organic Vintners for our appetizers and beverages. So without them, you guys wouldn't be able to relax tonight and have a good wine. But just real quick, I will introduce Steve. He wrote me a nice bio here.
Cut it way down, would you?
But again, we'd like to thank all of our presenters for all 6 of our programs, and Steve is our grand finale, so he's feeling a little intimidated that he's the kahuna at the end.
The oldest artifact.
But again, without all these individuals to loan us items for the exhibit, we would not have been able to have anything on display, because we ourselves don't actually own any of the items you see downstairs, other than the panels. So, whenever you're ready, we'll be happy to take them for good. Just real quick, Steve Demos is a founder and former president of White Wave and Company, founded in 1977. White Wave and Company and its successor, White Wave Foods, which started in 2004, is the largest producer and marketer of soy milk products in the U.S. White Wave products are sold in over 96% of the nation's supermarkets, and the Silk brand is #1 revenue producing soy milk in America. Steve graduated from Bowling Green University in 1970 with a liberal arts degree. From 1970 to 74, he traveled extensively throughout Asia studying Eastern philosophy and returned to the U.S. with a specific goal of starting an environmentally focused company based on a clearly articulated value system. Steve was one of the early American entrepreneurs to further the concept of right livelihood, and that's in quotes, just so you know. Steve was awarded the Boulder Chamber of Commerce Entrepreneur to Watch in 1977, and Entrepreneur of Distinction in 90. Sorry. Cut off a whole decade.
And a really old entrepreneur in the year 2000.
White Wave was named Small Business of the Year in 1992 and Colorado recipient of the U.S. Small Business Administration Entrepreneurial Success 2001 Award. In 2001, Inc. magazine named White Wave to its list of top 500 fastest growing companies in America. Steve was inducted into the Boulder, Colorado Business Hall of Fame in 2003. He has been featured on the cover of Wall Street Journal, as well as Forbes, Small Business, Fortune Magazine, USA Today, CNN Financial News, and Success Magazine as a leading innovator reflecting the American entrepreneurial spirit.
That'll do.
I was going to say, you want to just cover the bottom?
No, I expected the first 2 sentences and we're into 3 paragraphs.
It was such good stuff, though.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anyways,
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I want to thank Nancy and Julie, not only for making the horrible mistake of giving a soapbox to an entrepreneur, but they've done it repeatedly, so you have a real problem, but also for breathing some life into the belief in the opportunity of the natural and organic foods industry in Boulder. It is integral to the character and the qualities that I think a lot of people believe in Boulder, so thanks for your part in that. Also, thanks for giving all of us that are in that picture a new resume line. We're currently on display at the Boulder History Museum. We're not dead, and we're not stuffed, and we're not preserved. So I emailed Julie, and I asked her, I said, what would you like this evening? She said, well, maybe you should talk a little bit about how tofu and silk helped shape the world of natural foods and the lifestyles in Boulder. So I did a little reflecting, and I came up with the following. Very early in the history of White Wave, and there's a couple people in the room that actually were part of this and will remember it, but we were very effective in contributing to a number of economic sectors in Boulder The first was the legal defense community, because the plant had to be shut down when all of the employees were put in jail, and they used the line "tofu made me do it," because we had all marched down to Rocky Flats and had protested the opening of the nuclear trigger plant down there. So there's something to be said, because the tofu factory only closed twice. Once for that, and once when the Grateful Dead came to town. And it was the day after they came to town that we came over. I don't know why. I don't know what that was. There was something in it. We contributed to the therapy community because of all the bad food experiments and the tofu hot dogs that I sent my son and daughter to school with early on, so the therapy community was very happy with it. The party and concert industry loved White Wave. We threw at least 7 times we rented the Boulder Theater and threw major parties with Ziggy Marley, Creedence Clearwater, the Neville Brothers, Michael Franti, Blues Project, Peter Cater, Firefall, and on it goes. So I think when I left White Wave, the party community and the catering community really heard the death knells. But and then we also, I don't know how many people went through the exhibit downstairs and saw that wonderful portrait that was shot of me in 1977, but I feel that it did a lot to stimulate the charitable donations for the Vegetarian Famine Relief encouraging everyone to eat more beef. And finally, we convinced all of Boulder that tofu was a food and not an exotic foot disease. Those were the major contributions we felt that we made. We didn't get that across yet. We still have work to do.
Sounds good to me.
I'm not going to go through the entire White Wave story tonight, although if questions come out and you want to hear the story, I'm happy to talk about bathtubs and red wagons and caves in India and all those things. But once I do talk about a couple of the things that I think that we did demonstrate that are of great value, I'd like to open it up for questions. I think Julie had the intent of making this as much a dialogue rather than a monologue as possible. So I know that there are a lot of people from White Wave Foods here. They're looking for some history maybe and some of the anecdotes and anything else that is on people's minds. So I'm going to be short in talking about what we brought and longer in answering your questions. What a lot of people don't know is that the founding of White Wave had nothing to do with soy. It really didn't. Soy was used as a vehicle to demonstrate a philosophy. And the philosophy, as I think I was responding to Jerry's question earlier this evening, goes all the way back to that trip to India and the life-changing events that occurred there. I was introduced to a concept called right livelihood. Right livelihood is a very basic principle. It's a very, very old Buddhist principle. It's very simple. There's nothing esoteric about it. There's nothing cultish. It's simply defined as following: good for me, good for you, good for anybody who touches it. Good for me, good for you, good for anything that touches it. Okay, that means that my goal was to demonstrate that business wasn't all that bad. In the late 60s, there's enough of us in the room that remember that, well, at least they say they were there. Business was bad, profit was ugly, big business was even worse. And, you know, we were the disillusioned era that was going to change the world. We're still disillusioned and still changing the world, so nothing's really changed. And neither has business, has it? We're sending CEOs to prison. We've got bad role models out there. We've got bad examples of the business circumstances. My goal was to prove to myself that a business wasn't at the root of all of this. Human beings and their decisions were. I came out of an entrepreneurial family. My father was an extraordinarily hardworking man and very honest. Honor was was held in the highest regard. So here I am faced with the peer pressure of the late 60s saying, you know, big's bad, profit's awful, business is ugly, let's all drop out. And this man who actually invented, at the time, the concept of profit sharing before there was a word for it, there was a term for it. He decided that the way to stay away from unionizing his facilities was to share in the profitability of his business. and he's done this now since 1960, 1950 something. So I went away to Asia with this great contradiction of the era in my brain that business is bad, but here's a man who's demonstrating the American dream, the American principle. And I had somewhat of an epiphany, if you will, or an experience where I decided that it wasn't business that had a problem, it was human beings, and we were making poor choices, and we were not being led by role models and demonstrations of wealth creation that was free of guilt or negativity, and that I was going to take it upon myself to sort of justify my own DNA, that I'm a capitalist, I embrace business, I love business, I think it's the most powerful force on the planet, and I think it is a force that can be aligned with positive social change. So I came back from India with a goal to found a right livelihood business and prove that you could create wealth and power and success inside the American system and have create zero negativity and zero ill will. I call it no guilt, wealth with no guilt. So what did we bring over the past 28 years or 30 years that I was involved with it? Well, we clearly wrote another chapter in the American dream. I moved to Boulder. I hitchhiked into Boulder. I was a dishwasher down at one of the restaurants down here, fresh out of India. I borrowed $500 from a guy, and you all read about the end result of that. We proved that faith and hard work, good ideas, honest people working and sharing together can succeed and create material success. We created, in the sale of the company, 21 millionaires. We shared the wealth inside the business. We created a lot of happy people that really believe that business isn't just a grind. It actually can be a passion that you can find fulfillment within. It's not something that you show up for every day because you have to. You show up every day because there's such a passion for what's going on inside the walls and in the staircases and in the hallways. The buzz and the feeling of a positive direction and a positive movement was compelling. And we demonstrated that right livelihood as a philosophical and a business premise is extremely powerful and is in fact effective. It's a very, very narrow path. It is not appropriate for every product and every idea and every person on the planet. But if one is so inclined to take and fanatically commit themselves to a passion and to a system and make decisions that are absolutely consistent with that from day one, then you can hit a stream of harmony. That's the only way I can describe it. It doesn't mean the work's any easier. It doesn't make any of it easier or less intense, but I absolutely will probably live my entire life testifying to the fact that if you adhere strictly to the principles of right livelihood all the way up and down, and you live it, you breathe into it in your organization, it will compel you to success, however you want to define that. But it means that you have to demonstrate that right livelihood is what I'll call the full green approach. The full green. We're not talking organic. We're not talking environmental. I don't know a word that will encompass this. But when you talk about good for me, okay, it's got to return to the investors, it's got to return to the workers. Good for you, it's got to return to the customers, it's got to return to the vendors, it's got to return to anybody who touches it. That means that it can't be life-taking. It's got to be sustainable. Otherwise, that's a one-way street. So we were embracing organics and environmentalism before the terms came around because that was the sustainable business model. And we were investing back into our supply chain because, well, who wants to exhaust their organic supply chain? That's just silly. So truly organic sustainability has nothing to do with whether you use fertilizers or not. That's one aspect. But I think that we are able to demonstrate that right livelihood was not only handsomely profitable because we generated enormous amounts of return on investment. We generated double-digit returns as profitability. We operated responsibly in the business world, and I used to tell our team, we have 2 strikes against us before we even start. We're selling soy, for God's sakes. We have to be We were selling the most hated food in the United States. I'd sit down on a plane, and the guy or the gal next to me would say, what do you do for a living? And I go, well, we got an hour, so let's play a game. I'm responsible for the most hated food in the United States. What's that? And they always said liver, and I thought that was a body part. I never thought of that as a food. So, but then we read that yogurt was the number 3 was the second most hated food in the U.S., so I felt we were in good company. Another age-old traditional food that generated billions of dollars and does good things for human beings. So the concept of demonstrating that right livelihood, which was my personal mission, was a powerful economic force. Our goal, even as I embraced working with a much, much larger corporation, was I was going to bring green to green. I wanted to demonstrate to Wall Street that we could generate higher returns on capital. We had all the jargon down. Let's just put it this way. We understood what the business world needed to feed that beast, and we were doing it extremely well. We had our systems down, our cost of goods in control. At the same time as making all of this money and profitability, we were demonstrating our social responsibility. We were very deeply involved in the community, whether it's community food share or EFA or the homeless shelter, the garden up there, Amnesty International, or a group called Surgicorps. I'm going on a trip tomorrow to Bhutan to do volunteer surgery work. See, I stayed in a Holiday Inn last night, and now I'm doing surgery. These hands. One of the groups that we funded, one of the very, very early investments in White Wave was by the founder. But was the founder of Surgicorps. Surgicorps goes overseas and fixes what I call broken babies. Cleft palates, birth defects, missing body parts, on children mostly, some elderly. And it was just, we chose local, regional, national, and international, global areas, and we allocated contributions back to them. So good for me, good for you, good for anyone who touches it, is the society within which you live. So if I could sit on the porch rocking and achieve my goals through my career, it would be that I created great wealth for the people who invested. We affected positively the community that we operated within, that we shared that wealth creation with the people who generated it, and that we were nonviolent, that we actually were bringing a value to the world. I think we did this. We got 15 million homes, the last data that I saw, consuming the product. That's a pretty deep penetration. We're in over 95% of the supermarkets. So we proved that right livelihood is a business model to be reckoned with and hopefully emulated, so that this very, very powerful force of making money can be redirected. Can you imagine corporations that aren't just wearing it on their sleeve because, well, green's the thing to do today, but that they're breathing life into the concept of feeding people, or eradicating, or drinking water, or the basic necessities? We won't even get to the elevated stuff. And we certainly are seeing demonstrations of that with the Bill Gates and the Warren Buffetts of the world, who are amassing enormous wealth and then giving it back. But that's single-time effort. That's single-time events to me. I want to see business do this. I envision a society where business breathes back because, well, that's right livelihood. So, I can talk a lot about largest organic product in the world. At one point, I don't know if it is today, largest organic purchaser of sugar, largest organic purchaser and supporter of soybeans, lead sponsors for a lot of environmental and organic things. We can go all over the map. The bottom line is we learned how to make money and we learned how to do it without creating disharmony. And if there is a great accomplishment in what we've done, it's that one. It's that we created wealth inside a community and we demonstrated how to share it, and that you can do this without exploiting to the extreme that you see in business today, or that you're afraid business will take you to. I'm going to turn it over to questions. I know it's a little early, and I can go through the stories, but I figured that it'd be more interesting this way. Sherry, I know you've got one, so let's start right there and see how far we
Steve,
go.
Ellen and I have had a lot of years of experience with venture capital and entrepreneurs, and you have one, I'm sure you have many unique distinctions, but one unique distinction is that 99 out of 100, and probably more than that, people who espouse beliefs like right livelihood and who go to India to learn those spiritual beliefs fail at the job of managing a company. If there were going to be the distinction for Steve the Wonderful, what is it?
I got a great story for you. I'm working with a couple esoteric groups. One of them is negotiating with a man in South America, very, very elevated, known healer. They're having a lot of trouble pinning down the negotiation for how much, when, and where, because every time the man shows up, a different personality shows up to negotiate. Jerry, that might be the answer. I'm schizophrenic.
John of God.
Yes. And they're just having difficulties nailing it down so John of God can actually, so I think it's brilliant corporate negotiation. I'm sorry, that deal is off. I had a talk with myself, it's not going to fly anymore. So my lawyer side is here and he wants to talk to you. I went to India on, let me back up. We're in pretty deep and personal, so I hope it doesn't sound too egotistical. I think your time on the planet is the most precious gift you're given. I think your time on the planet is your opportunity to enlighten yourself and evolve. And if you don't apply yourself to that, well, I don't know why I don't know what you're doing. But for me, it was, first of all, recognizing what my dharma was, what my purpose was. And I was living the life of a renunciate in India. I was what your mother warned you never to hang out with. You know, long hair, beads, robes, and living in a cave and all that jazz. And we had, and actually, the later to be CFO of the company was with me. So she and I had this epiphany together. And we had an embarrassing circumstance where true pilgrims from India started giving us money. And they only make like $10 a year or something, and they're laying money at our feet. And, you know, we got our passports buried behind us in the cave. Probably traveler's checks with it to get us out of here in the event there's a problem. And it was such a slam in our face that we said, this isn't our world. And we had learned that, you know, if you want to evolve, you've got to work out that which is standing in front of you, which faces you. So I've never taken a business class in my life, and nor had Pat at that point. She came back, went to accounting, went to CU and got her accounting degree, and I just started eating everything I possibly could because I had a mission, and I was going to learn how to do this. I think that's the miracle of the human mind and potential of its spirit, that when you find something that is of greater value than you, and you drag yourself up to it, you become a greater person. And if you commit yourself to learning whatever's necessary, you just become very, very good at it. And I was absolutely committed because I knew I was going to be trying to change people's habits. And it had to be an extremely creditable approach. We had to demonstrate practicality, fiscal responsibility, all of the business skills had to be present or people were going to laugh us out of the room. My first meeting with a banker in Boulder, who became a good friend, he said, "What do you do?" I said, "I make tofu." He said, "I'm so sorry." And that's a true story. And that was all to borrow $5,000. It's some ridiculously small amount of money. So it's the commitment of the spirit to a higher purpose that calls you to train your mind. And when you narrow yourself down and you train your mind, you become whatever it is you dream you're going to become. So I became a businessman for 30 years. I'm working on the next iteration. I'm not sure what that one is yet, but that's why I put those elements together inside one personality. I'd rather be a hippie in the cave, but it didn't work out that way. Yes.
How did you integrate, especially back at the beginnings, the idea of sustainable, the part about the thing and not harming the thing? How did you integrate sustainable ideas in your business and with the vendors that you worked with? What did you have to do, and what were the challenges, some of those, to do that?
There was an organic industry then, although it was Rodale Farms and MLPA, and I was actually raised in that area, near there, not in that area, but so we knew that these products were out there. We had to just go find the supply. So we actually helped stimulate the supply and the raising of organic and natural product. At one point, we actually couldn't get enough organic material, so we invented products called transitional organic. And transitional organic, we paid the farmers full organic price, we paid a high percentage of organic because we could pass that on to the consumer, but we couldn't call it organic. But we knew we needed to build a bridge between the transitional farmer, who was going to take 2 years to get to his organic standing, and the economic hit they were going to take in the process. So I remember driving around Iowa, going from farm to farm and sitting in farmhouse kitchens talking to people and telling them that, we were going to be a loyal company, and we needed supply, and this is what we're doing and where we're going. There's lots of funny stories because it wasn't really all that perfected. Pouring half the bag was beans, half the bag was dirt. But that was the organic industry at that point, very unsophisticated and very undeveloped. We weren't we're not environmental purists. We have intention to go in a direction. So we packed everything in plastic, but we constantly looked for, can we find replacements? Can we find alternatives? So it's an effort. It's the intent that counts. Age-old stories about two people who get plunged with a knife. One's a robber sticking somebody, one's a surgeon cutting somebody open. The difference is the intent, isn't it? But because the damage to the human body is the same. Our intent was to move in a particular direction. We moved in that direction, and we were constantly talking about being responsible and breathing our personal philosophies into business.
Did your customers pay for what you had to pay for? Is that how it worked?
We had to pass it on. But, our operative is we will not be oversold. So we were always the most expensive products on the market. Right. You raise the price and I'll one up you. You can't get there from here. We were always the most expensive, but we delivered. We lived to that. We gave back more because it was more than what was in the container that we were selling, and we knew that. Dale Hess, from who currently worked with White Wave and was integral in the design of many things, not the least of which is naming the product Silk, is very keen on this because I used to sit with he and our marketing director and say, we're selling a package here, we're not selling a product, we're selling an ethic. And we need to communicate that, we need to breathe into it, it needs to project out, no matter what we're talking about. Yes?
I remember in the 80s, I was also involved in the all-natural food business, because I had my own business back in the 80s, that several stores started putting out the pamphlets that go with the product. They used to be next to the products. There were pamphlets there about what the whole standing about the product, about what you do with the product, how you help people in the environment and everything else.
Yeah.
Are those still being put out like that?
I don't know. I'm sure there are people in the room that can answer that question as far as what's being done today. At one point, just prior to launching Silk, we launched vegetarian cuisine centers. We had probably 50 different products, and we created cartoon characters, and we created whole story around the environmental benefits. God, it was so long ago. And we got, who's the inheritor of Baskin Robbins? John Robbins, who did Diet for a New America, to work with us and give us the environmental impact. And we put out posters. And so we were in the education business. We were in the transformation business. And we sold soy products as a revenue producer to get there. As time went forward, the mouth of the funnel narrowed to a bullet, and the bullet became silk, and the product began to speak for itself, and the packaging and what it represented and how it could impact things on a much larger scale. As you go along, you demonstrate inside a store that you can feed 10 people and you give them food. I'm sorry, I keep turning this way, and I apologize. You can demonstrate and feed 10 people when you're a small company. And then you can hand out coupons and affect 1,000 people in a newspaper. And you can go on TV and you can affect millions of people. And then when you actually breathe in and become part of the culture and you lead, then you actually affect the culture. You can't count the millions. You're actually initiating change. My goal was to drive people lower on the food chain. My contribution would be I reduced the demand on the animal kingdom. So I thought that our environmental message and our philosophical message were right at the very root, and we never left that. We never left that. Yes?
Was it silk or was it the tofu that really made the difference? And why the soy product? Why was understand?
Nobody hates silk. Tofu, a little polarizing. I love tofu, by the way. It was silk. It was silk that delivered us to the pearly gates. There is zero question about that. Tofu is a generational after generational shift. It takes an enormous amount of change and awareness and educational burden, and it will occur. And it will occur because it's a sustainable protein that has yet to find its American introduction. And until we hit silk, we were, I don't know if you all remember the movie long ago, it was called The War Games, and this kid was playing a computer game against a computer that was trying to come up with the Holocaust circumstance of an A-bomb. And we felt like we were the computer, churning through ideas, trying to find the entry port for vegetarian foods. Mm-hmm. Silk was it. And literally, it didn't take long before we were throwing everything off the train we could possibly throw off, because it was a true bullet and it was headed for the moon, and you could just sense it. It was everything just to strap yourself to the rocket and hold on. Oh, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. We did well, but there was a lot of exhilaration. I have a couple friends that are going through certain similar circumstances, maybe not as big, maybe they'll so, but I keep telling them to breathe deep, because it doesn't get any better than where you are right now, pal. Yes.
Well, to that point, I mean, this whole industry that you helped give birth to has gone through lots of changes. And I mean the natural product industry in general, which is mainstream acceptance, which is a good problem to have. But do you have a crystal ball in terms of the debates out there about big versus big being? We
did the word natural. When Nature Valley, which was owned by General Foods, I think at the time, started putting out, chocolate dipped sprinkled Jimmy granola bars in the 70s, and chocolate dipped rice cakes coming out of whatever company that was, we knew that, oh God, we're in trouble. Well, yeah, watch what happens now. Now, with that said, one step in the right direction is still a step in the right direction. For us to be aware about environmentalism, to be aware about social responsibility is great. I get a little nervous because I think it's going to have sort of a veneer of fakeness to it, which is going to take people away from this really valuable concept of tying things together like Right Livelihood does. Because then it'll be, well, we don't need to do all that. We just need to pick up something green. And I think that's what you're going to witness. My crystal ball says we're in trouble here. Now, The real ones will hunker down and weather the storm and will not give up their authenticity. And it will be a storm, and it will pass, and it will take a decade to do so. And there still will be people out there trying to change for the better society, and I don't think it's about environmentalism, and I don't think it's about social responsibility, and I don't think it's about any of those individually, and I do think it's about all of them. And I think that's the concept. It's the totality of green, this holistic concept, not can I, save penguins, whales, and something else.
I think you touched on something though that integrates all those things together, and I wanted to get your idea on this. Was you talked about at the end result of the process, you come up with an idea, you come up with a concept, you sell the concept, you find the product, you change the way the manufacturers work to bring you what you need, but the sustainability or not the right livelihood of it's good for it, not just you and me, but it. I think the you part you got well. I think the you and me part can work well, but if you're not making sure that the final product is sustainable,
Well, that's just bad economics, isn't it?
It totally is. It's,
Right.
so, it's very simple.
It's just bad economics.
It's very
And
simple.
I didn't pay attention in that class either.
Well, but what I'm saying is if you can keep the focus
Yes,
of people
that's
on the
correct.
end result, then all this BS that you think it could build into will get phased out fairly quickly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I believe in greed. I really do. I think that there are only two forces on the planet, fear and greed. You're either running from or towards.
Right.
Everything else is somewhere in between that. And I think that if you were to demonstrate that greed is not a bad thing, if it's enlightened self-serving interest, then it can work. Now, why in the world would you have a supply chain that exhausts itself? You're out of Schlitz. A bad example, it's a bad marketing example. I guess for an old Coors guy, it's even worse. Sorry. Environmentalism is not the top issue. It's sustainability on an economic level, and that's what needs to be sold. So I sell the concept of greed. I sell the concept of wealth without feeling bad. How many people out there do you know in your circle of friends that say, I hate what I do? Maybe not a lot anymore, I don't know, but there's an awful lot of people that are unhappy with, I'd really like to have pride in how I make my living. Well, go figure it out. And it is the things that have to do with what we're talking about here, and one of which is the sustainability of the supply chain, that if you go out and you exploit and exhaust, well, you run out of the opportunity to further that to be the grandest scale. We wanted to change the way people ate forever and ever, and it was going to be based on an agricultural product, and right from day one it was an organic product. We never ever sold anything other than that. Transitional organic is the only compromise we made to that. So I think you're right. I think we got to get away from the buzzes, the bumper speak stuff, and get into the heart, and capitalism has a problem right now. We're not demonstrating healthy models where profit is not a destination. Profit's just another occurrence in the value creation circumstance of business. And once you get to the point where you've created value, they give you a whole bunch of dough. Whether it's individually or whether it's a business. Okay, now what do you do with that resource? Do you allocate it all to one constituent? Oh, the investors need that. Well, that means you didn't invest back into your customers, your vendors, your suppliers, your community. That's silly. That's not sustainable business. So I see business. My passion is business, not silk and soy, although I certainly embrace them pretty deeply and heartily. But I think you're right. Start speaking about the root, not about the symptoms. Let me go to the back for a second. Yep.
Can you talk about your decision to sell White Wave and then what you've done as a result of that?
I describe my career as 20 years in hell and 8 years in heaven. I took in a lot of money, as all small entrepreneurs do, early in the game. I used to give interviews and say I'm working for my grandchildren because I'm going to change the way you eat. I was absolutely committed to doing this. I'm going to change the way you eat and get you eating lower on the food chain. I did not expect it to happen during my lifetime, genuinely. So after 18, 20 years of truly beating our heads against the wall finally gave in. We saw that the FDA was going to embrace the product soy, the category, as a bona fide cholesterol reducer. And I feel in Right Livelihood, good for me, good for you, good for anybody who touches it, includes the investors, and I wanted to return. And I said, well, this is my opportunity. So I remember sitting on a hill not far from here in Chautauqua with the management team, and we were a $10 million business. And we said, we think we can grow this to $80 million, and that's a grand slam. That's the biggest thing we had ever dreamt of. We couldn't see anything bigger than that. And we knew that we were going to require money to get into the market. So we went out and interviewed all the VC money that we could find, and all the strategic partners. I called Nestle, Coke, Pepsi. Dean Food Chicago was the only company that would even take the call. And it was a man who was running, Dennis Purcell, who was running the specialty division. He was running the pickle division. We went in on pickles. And they gave us the money to place the product in the supermarkets. Ironic that, we were supposed to make product in their factories and put it on their trucks. All the delusion that a young entrepreneur has and says, I'm going to hook up with a big company. We were with them for a number of years. They shifted ownership down to Dallas. We never put a drop through the Chicago Dean Foods facilities. They never put one drop on a truck. They never gave us any help at all, zero. So it was a bad partnership. And when they stumbled,
Were they your partner at this time?
they became a minority holder. I was still the majority stockholder. Not the majority stockholder, the largest stockholder. They hit a bump, and they were in a battle with a company called Squeeza Foods out of Dallas. Squeeza acquired them. In the acquisition, let me back up. The week before we sold it, I went in to Chicago and I met with the chairman and everybody from Dean, and I said, you guys can't afford us. I said, we're growing too quickly. We're going to need capital, and you're not going to cough it. Can I raise the money to buy you out? I think we can. They put $5 million in. I said, I can give you a $100 million return on your $5 million investment. They sent me out the door and said, fine, go do it. We'll take that. I called them up. I said, Howard Dean, not the Howard Dean, another Howard Dean. I said, Howard, I'm not going out on a limb. I'm calling financial advisors all over New York, and people, don't put me out on this limb because my credentials are out there unless you mean this, because I'll raise the money. He said, nope, we mean this. Go ahead. 2 days later, one of my co-packers called and said, listen, guess what? You were just sold. It's all over the news wires. I said, I was what? So we went through a few court battles, and we lost. And the end comment was the judge said, Mr. Demas, I can't answer for White Wave, but I will tell you our position. We got soundly beaten up in the Wall Street Journal one time because we were so audacious to say contains no GMOs. Our beans were raised in the panhandle of Texas at that point. They were isolated from all other crops by 100 miles or more. There was no trace GMOs of any sort in our product whatsoever. The science testing the bean only goes to 99.99%, which means you can call a product, according to FDA, fat-free with fat still in it, but I couldn't call, according to the Wall Street Journal, that we were GMO-free because the testing mechanism didn't go down low enough. Now, USDA, by defining organic, by regulating the definition of organic, has mandated that it stays GMO-free. So the best thing I can tell you about soy is just look for the USDA organic certification. And it will have a threshold to it. There is a level, I think it's 99.95, something like that if I'm not mistaken. It's been a few years. But
they won't let you label it because that insinuates that other products have GMOs and certification by them.
You can say made without bioengineered soy, but you can't claim 100% free because I hate to tell you this, but we're living in a tainted world. And even now, I'll bet you we couldn't even pass the testing thresholds, even if they went to 100%, because I think it's probably pretty well contaminated out there. I mean, drop a handful of soybeans on the floor and watch, and they'll hit all four corners, just rolling. Okay, take your soybeans to a grain elevator and think about what happens when there's billions of beans going through the same elevator that processes non-GMOs and GMOs, and you're going to have some contamination. So the reality is you can only go as far as the thresholds of testing and the law of the land will permit you to. And consumers change the karma of soy, not companies. Really.
So I'm going in a totally different direction because of what's going on in the climate change of everything going on. We're talking about the bees situation. What will happen? I know that location-wise is in the Midwest. There's a lot of bees that are dying. 2/3 of the bees have already been dead. That they're having all of this particular contamination of the bees dying. Isn't that going to affect the soy crops?
There was a really great Discovery Channel program on about a week or two ago on, I don't know if we all recognize this, but every plant on the planet now is a flowering
Yes,
plant.
that's correct.
And the only way they reproduce is pollen being transferred.
Yes.
So it's either wind blown or insects.
Right.
So the loss of bees will have a staggering impact on pollination against all of the plant species we see out there. I'm not a botanist. I don't know anything more than the scary stuff that I'm hearing now. I was in a conversation today on just this topic.
Yeah, I was listening to it today.
And it's
pretty scary.
yeah, it's not understandable at this point. But you know, I don't buy in on the mites, but we'll wait and see. I do question the ubiquitousness of microwaves all around us, and it is disorienting the bees to the point where they're not capable of using their own radar systems to get home. And that's possibly why they're not finding bodies or anything else of these bees. So it's a tragedy. Now,
It is.
Hey Steve, if you wish, I can answer those questions.
Sure,
I'm a
go ahead.
beekeeper. 95% of the native honeybee population is gone already. What's worrying people is a disorder called sudden hive collapse disorder, and you're losing a lot of commercial beehives. And some beekeepers this winter have reported losses of 70% or more of commercial hive keeping. And you won't lose. There are natural other pollinators besides bees, but honeybees, Apis mellifera, do about, without them, you'd lose about 70% of yields of most human crops, higher with fruit tree crops. And so it's an issue. But they're importing bees aggressively from Australia right now because, you know, beekeepers need to make a living, so they still need hives to go out and pollinate, especially for tree crops. Soy is not heavily bee dependent. It's soy and corn. One of the reasons why the GMO spread so much is they're mostly wind pollinators. So in terms of tofu, you're not in too big trouble. But in terms
thank you.
in terms of the big picture,
Tofu rules.
in terms of the big picture, there could be quite a bit of trouble.
Yeah. Yes.
Can a public company practice right livelihood? And if so, are there examples that you would cite? Damn.
I believe that I believe Whole Foods is close, although there's a compromise there because they sell animal product. So nobody can achieve right livelihood. You can move towards it.
Right, practice. I'm
And I think that I like I know John pretty well, and I know their team pretty well, and I know what their heart and intent are in. So I think they're headed in the right direction. And as a public company, but they've taken a beating on Wall Street within, they lost 25% of their value within the last year, although they were trading at a 60 plus PDE.
Right.
So silly things like that impacted. I do believe that it's possible, but it's going to take a really gutsy CEO, because you're reporting to a different constituency when you're reporting on right livelihood than you are to just the stockholder. You're just measuring statistics and metrics. Yeah, I think it's doable, but radically different than what you're seeing pretty much out there today.
Can I ask one follow-up question? Is triple bottom line a step towards right livelihood?
Yeah, that's just the buzz. It is.
I mean, when practice in
It is. That's just the jargon of the day, but get deeper. I would encourage you that if you have true interest, study it, understand it, and breathe some life into it, because it's going to come. Look, my wife hates me when I say this. Authenticity stinks. It has an odor. It's a very pleasant perfume. You can smell it every time you get near it. Okay? It's genuine. It comes from people and things that are projecting. They're not trying. They're just being. When you look in deep enough and figure out the concept of bringing this great value to the totality of the business, you become a missionary fanatic. You're a nutcase. And the world needs more of them. God forbid we get too much Ritalin out there.
you get too late for that.
Well, they threaten me all the time. It is? No. The point is that I do think it's possible. I'm the eternal optimist, and I do think it's achievable, but it's going to take authentic embracing, not academic understanding of a model or a concept at this stage of the game. So, yeah, it's doable, and I encourage you to look in deep and see what you can do to bring it to life. Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, when you came back from India and you were thinking of starting your company, how did you decide on tofu, and were you thinking of any other products besides that?
I was doing a 76-day silent meditation course. And I was supposed to be meditating from 3 in the morning, and I was thinking about business. And I came up with the idea of starting a company, and I named it, and went to the course instructors and said, can I feed you guys tofu? So I taught myself how to make tofu during this course, and came out, and it was very clear what I was going to do and where I was going to go. I had no money, but I knew exactly where I was going and what I was going to do. And it was only, I've got it. I'm gonna use soy as my vehicle for right livelihood, and I had no clue tofu was the thing at that time. But we went through 200 iterations. We made everything that you've seen on the market today. Every product Dale probably designed a package for it. Hot dogs, sausages, salad dressings, burgers, entrees. I can't think of anything that's out there in the soy realm today that we weren't number 1 or number 2 in the country at some point, trying to find the consumer interest in showing up. We found it with silk. Yes?
Did you ever get to a point before things really took off where you just thought, this isn't going to work? You know, you were close to just giving up? And
Yeah, a few times. Yeah, I think that's the value of choosing right livelihood, of committing yourself to something that is of a very, very deep intrinsic value. I remember sitting in the office with Pat. We were bankrupt. I mean, we were so down in everything, behind on payables, everything. We were taking on water, and she said, and both of our houses were exposed. We had collateralized loans with our homes. And she said, I think we better be going down to the courthouse. I think we need to protect ourselves. And I said, you know, we're doing something wrong, but there's nothing wrong with this concept. The world needs this. And I said, I'll get on the phone and I'll call every creditor. And I'll tell them, not only are we not paying you back right now, but we're not paying you interest, and you got to keep selling to us on credit. And they did. One company, I won't name it, they're a local one in Boulder. I must have owed them less than $500. They called up, they're adamant, I'm going to pay you. I said, listen, we will make it through this. We will be a significant business in Boulder. We've been around a long time. And I will pay you every dime I owe you. I'll bring it over to you now. But I will never, ever give you another dime in business so long as I'm alive. And I didn't. And there was a cleaning company in town that we probably owed them less. And they came and said, whatever it takes, we'll just work it. And I said the opposite to them. I will give you business. I don't care if you're the worst supplier in the world. I will stick by you the way you're sticking by us. So we called every one of them up. 9 months later, we were out of the hole. But during that, we wondered, what are we doing this for? There were many times. That was just one of the most egregious. It was 20 years of hell. It really was. It was horrible. I got scar tissue all over my physical body from machinery biting me, but I was a missionary. I was committed to seeing something through, and I just believed in the power of what we were doing. So a lot of my family, who are in the professional sector of some form or another, told me I was absolutely crazy, that I was wasting education and existence. They were, by the way, they were investors in the business, and they're quite happy now. Hang on, let me see if there's anyone else that have we missed anybody.
Steve,
Yes.
Just any big mistake or big regret you have that you'd feel comfortable sharing?
Well, I don't. We didn't know anything, so there's plenty of ways of looking back on things and saying I would do it differently now. But having never had any business training, having never had any financial training, it was all on the fly. So when you turn around and you look back, every step was a necessary step. It was the scar. We used to sit around. Pat and I would sit around and laugh and say, "We really scar well together," and we did. We scarred well together, and we came out the other side. Yeah. So no, I can't think of things that I actually regretted because, I will say it, right livelihood gives you a moral and ethical boundary that you never go outside of. So you never have anything to be remorseful about, because usually the remorse is bad ethics and bad morals. Bad business, we didn't make really bad decisions, but again, we were in Boulder, Colorado, and we couldn't hurt ourselves. We were in the People's Republic. Yes.
I've been thinking about what you said a few moments ago, and actually, you said it at the Nationally Boulder deal back in November about sort of the VC private equity piece. And
at least I'm consistent. Always want to check in.
You alluded to it. It was months ago, and I'm involved in that area. And I've been thinking about it because you talk about 20 years of hell, and I think that part of the reason why VC is so aggressive and so impatient is because there are so few entrepreneurs that are willing to go through 20 years of hell. And that if you look at this as a full equation here, half of it is the VC wanting the money too quick, and the other half of it is that the entrepreneurs aren't, oftentimes I feel, patient enough to go through the hell. And so as a result, you have so many companies that fail, and so the VCs need the 1 in 10 or whatever it is.
I think that's probably true, but I think we're also seeing a maturation to the financial market out there. The availability of money is so great that I think if somebody comes along and actually espouses a sound, slow return philosophy based on professionals and disciplines and systems, capital is probably the easiest thing in the world to find anymore. Yeah, but I didn't know that then. Yeah. You don't know that when you're on this side of the curve. You know that when you're over the other side, and you can turn around and say, well, here's the path. I know the path. I know where you can hurt yourself and where it's a waste of capital and where it's proper return on capital. It is a sales job. We have to retrain capital so that there is short-term gain, there's mid-term gain, and there's long-term return, slow return. And that's just going to be a change over a long period of time.
Capital. There's a ton of capital today.
Well, I'll say.
But 5 years ago, there wasn't, and I would argue that maybe in a year there won't be, or 5 years there won't be.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
There's always capital for disciplined ideas with a good product, for innovation. There's never capital for a Me Too. There's short-term capital for a Me Too because they got to get in and get out because it's a risky game. There's always going to be capital available for the long view that's well articulated and well thought out and well designed. I counsel a number of entrepreneurs right now. It's the easiest thing in the world to get. What you need to get first is your fundamentals in place. Prove that you're in control. Prove that you can go through, we used to call it the controlled bleed, because we'd forecast we're going to lose money here because we're entering this new market. But if we could go through it, control it, and show absolute discipline and control through the entire process, then we were in control of the process, not the elements out there in the environment. And I think entrepreneurs and businesses that demonstrate that have the easiest time finding capital. The ones that don't are constantly having their hands out in the begging. Julie.
I was just curious how you, I mean, I know you told me, but I know there's some people who don't know, and I find it really fascinating. How did you come up with the two names for your product? Was one meditating and one?
One was White Wave, was meditating. I'll take credit for that one.
Does it stand for anything? I mean, other than a white wave?
Oh, I remember. You know, I honestly do have a memory of this. First of all, I stole it from the Hokusai print from the 1400s, because that became our logo, a stylized version of that print. And I was literally making tofu in the middle of the morning. It wasn't the middle of the morning, it was 4 o'clock. It was the middle of my morning, but at any rate, stirring this pot as you have to make tofu. And it reminded me of the sea. And I remember thinking this. And I went back and sat on the pillow for another 12 hours. I said, I got it! Epiphany! And then I went, with Sook, I hired this agency, Spark Studios, to give me 5 or 10 different names. I think it was 10. And Dale and his team went away and came back, and they had a whole laundry list. And they had their favorite, which I didn't like. And I went away that weekend, and I came back on Monday, and I was convinced that, oh yeah, you guys are onto something. And thus we named it. I think that the brilliance in Silk was the combination of probably 10 different elements all at once, not the least of which was a brilliant name. Thank you again. But also, we had an insight with Silk, and that was the milk people a decade, 2, 3 decades before had put out cartons with missing children on them. I remember that. And it only lasted, remember, we talked about this, it only lasted for probably 6 months before they yanked that. And yet, it's part of our history. And it was so offensive to people to have somebody's sorrowful story on their breakfast table, that reading it, that the dairy industry just wiped it right off the map and said, we're never doing that again. And they went back to those very unimaginative cartons that they've been selling everybody for eons. Well, our insight was, my God, the package is making it to the table, and what's more is they're reading it. And we turned the package into an educational and entertainment vehicle. And we laid it out like a newspaper, and we lined up the columns, and we said we want information here and education here and kids stuff here and brain teasers there, and we did that, and we coupled it up with PR, and it was just a brilliant alignment of an awful lot of talent here in Boulder that made Silk take off. You agree with that?
I think we got lucky.
Yeah, you did. So did I. Thank you. Yes.
Some of the things you were saying, it sounds like Boulder was like the perfect place to be, because you had the customers who would respond to you and what you're trying to do, not only on the product side, which was an esoteric product, but on the philosophy. And then you had vendors who would work with you on every level. I mean, it sounds like this place is like an incubator in many different ways and many different levels. Customer-wise, manufacturer-wise, promotional-wise. I mean, Silk was that's a brilliant name.
Brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant.
I mean, that's what started me eating your product. Was like,
there you go.
Silk,
Thank the man.
What a great idea.
Thank the man.
Silk. It wasn't soy anymore. It was like something smooth and silky and luxurious. It was
sold him, did we? Get a coupon. Who's got a coupon? The man needs a coupon, damn it. He needs a bundle of them.
But I mean, here you had all these resources on in so many different ways. It's like
but not only for Silk. think about what happened. This is a vortex of all of those elements coming together. But it started with Celestial Seasons. Give credit where credit is due. They set up the model that you can cross the bridge into the mainstream. Herb tea got to a certain point, but it didn't get any further than that. But behind that, Green Mountain Mountain High Yogurt and Ice Cream, a number of companies. We just happen to embrace more parts around the whole circle, I think, than anybody else did. And that's just evolution. The next company that comes along behind us will look at it and say, well, they missed this and they missed that. And they'll put those elements in place. And that's the beauty of free enterprise and capitalism is, success is built upon success. And the evolution to capitalism, our goal was to demonstrate a model. Well, could there be a better model? Of course there can. It can be more perfected. And hopefully, whether it's I or you or anyone else who goes out and starts a business, it will say, well, these things work, let's do them, but we're going to add this. Because, well, that's even better. What a great place to do this. I'll let you know. Talk to me in a year. I'll let you know if it works twice. Or 20 years. Depending on how revolutionary the idea is. I always like walking down memory lane. This is kind of like flashbacks to the 60s, so I have thanks a lot. It's been a lot of fun. Is there any more questions that you have?
Thank you for coming.
Pleasure,
tonight
Nancy.
and
Thank you.
Being our last in our series of natural conversations. You clearly have an extraordinary story, and
Thanks.
it's wonderful to hear it. So thank you so much, and thank you to all of you who have come and participated in this series. Some of you have been to every one of them, and we really appreciate your support of the museum and joining us for this. And our exhibit will be up until June 10th, so please tell your friends and anyone else who might be interested in coming to see